So, Prince William and Princess Catherine have officially broken their silence. And the reason Camilla was supposedly forced out of Windsor Lodge is far more explosive than anyone could have anticipated. At the heart of the story, according to the reports, isn't simply a family disagreement over who should occupy which residence. The allegation is that Camilla took control of the historic villa without proper consultation, dismissed loyal staff members who had served the royal household for decades, and then callously dumped priceless memorabilia connected to the late Queen and Princess Diana into a cold, damp basement. And that, apparently, was only the beginning. The biggest twist allegedly came when William assembled what was described as overwhelming evidence that Camilla had diverted millions of pounds in royal funds to pay for extravagant gold-covered renovations, supposedly in an effort to wipe away every visible reminder of those who came before her. And that's where the entire situation becomes especially bizarre. Because if you're trying to strengthen your position as queen, deliberately destroying the memories of two of the most beloved women in modern royal history would be an incredibly strange strategy. Before we get into the chaotic details of how this allegedly unfolded, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button for Crown Watch. It really helps us continue bringing you these royal breakdowns. Alright, let's get into it. Hidden beyond the ancient oak groves of Windsor Great Park, Windsor Lodge has long been portrayed as a symbol of comfort and tranquility for the House of Windsor. It was where the late Queen Elizabeth enjoyed peaceful weekend retreats, and it reportedly held some of the most personal keepsakes associated with the late Princess Diana. That makes the emotional significance of this particular property extremely high. Now, according to the story, on a gloomy afternoon, Catherine steps out of the family car and finds herself standing before the imposing iron gates. But almost immediately, something feels wrong. The gates, which were supposedly kept open as a welcoming entrance, are now secured with thick, dull gray chains and an enormous steel padlock. Honestly, that detail alone feels incredibly aggressive. You don't casually lock down a royal residence with a giant padlock unless you're attempting to communicate a very deliberate message. But the situation becomes even more troubling. Standing on both sides of the entrance are not the familiar royal guards dressed in their traditional red uniforms. Instead, there are four imposing strangers dressed entirely in black. These men are allegedly private security personnel, personally brought in by Queen Camilla through an outside security company operating independently of the traditional palace security structure. When they notice Catherine approaching, they don't give her the respectful bow that royal protocol would normally require. Instead, they block the entrance with expressionless faces, their hands positioned near their tactical belts, staring at the Princess of Wales with an attitude described as suspicious and openly hostile, almost as though she were an outsider attempting to breach a military installation. If that account is accurate, then the entire situation becomes difficult to explain from a chain of command perspective. Catherine is the future queen. For private security personnel to treat her like a potential threat on royal property would represent a remarkable breakdown in the normal palace hierarchy. Then Catherine notices Mary, an elderly maid who had reportedly devoted more than 3 decades of her life to serving the late queen, standing outside the gates and shivering in a thin cardigan. In her hands is a small cardboard box containing the few belongings she had been allowed to take with her. Standing beside her is Arthur, the aging gardener who had personally cared for the white roses associated with Princess Diana. The humiliation is written clearly across their faces. Catherine immediately approaches them, and Mary, visibly struggling to hold back her tears, explains what happened. According to her account, Camilla had ordered the sudden overnight dismissal of nearly all the royal staff connected to the previous generation. The explanation given was that Camilla wanted to remove Windsor Lodge from the watchful eyes of the past and turn it into a completely controlled private fortress where she could operate without anyone questioning her decisions. And honestly, the logic behind dismissing a gardener specifically known for maintaining Diana's roses is difficult to understand unless the real objective was to eliminate the memory itself. That's not simply a security decision. That's something far more personal. So Catherine, now filled with completely understandable anger, turns around and walks directly toward the iron gates. With the natural authority expected of a princess, she orders the private guards to open the entrance immediately. The men in black exchange uncomfortable looks. Faced with Catherine's unmistakable determination, the leader of the group eventually retrieves the key and unlocks the heavy chains. Catherine steps inside the main hall, and almost immediately, she feels overwhelmed by what has supposedly been done to the historic interior. Camilla had apparently treated the estate as though it were her personal property, spending enormous amounts of royal money on extravagant renovations. The centuries-old oak paneling, decorated with hand-drawn sketches associated with generations of princes, has allegedly been covered with a cheap and painfully bright layer of gold-colored paint. The beautifully hand-woven silk carpets have been removed and replaced with flashy bright red rugs. The entire room has reportedly been transformed into what looks less like a historic royal residence and more like an exaggerated display of wealthy extravagance. And when you compare the explanation of necessary modernization with what was allegedly carried out, the argument starts to fall apart. Covering historic oak paneling in gold paint isn't preservation. It's destruction. But the most disturbing discovery is still waiting for Catherine. She moves from room to room and realizes there is virtually no sign of the priceless heirlooms connected to the late Queen and Princess Diana. The oil portrait of a young Diana with her radiant smile, which had reportedly occupied a prominent position in the living room for years, has disappeared. The late Queen's rosewood vanity table is nowhere to be found. Catherine's heart begins pounding with dread as she follows a dark corridor toward the damp underground storage rooms located behind the kitchen. Under the weak glow of her phone flashlight, she suddenly stops. In a cold, dusty corner covered with cobwebs, the family's treasured heritage has apparently been scattered across the floor like unwanted garbage. The late Queen's silver picture frame, engraved with the royal crest, is dented and partially buried beneath worn, handwritten diaries. And, most painfully of all, Princess Diana's portrait, which Camilla had allegedly ordered removed, is lying abandoned on the wet stone floor. The glass covering the portrait has been split by a long crack and is covered in grime from the basement. According to the story, Camilla had deliberately pushed these treasured memories into the darkness, seemingly determined to erase every remaining reminder of her predecessors. Catherine drops to her knees on the freezing stone floor, her hands trembling as she carefully lifts Diana's portrait. Using the edge of her coat, she gently wipes away the dirt covering the face of her late mother-in-law. The combination of grief and fury becomes almost impossible for her to contain. She knows she cannot simply walk away and remain silent. Holding the damaged portrait tightly against herself, she climbs the stairs with determined steps. She ignores the usual formalities and pushes open the grand double doors of the royal tea room on the second floor without knocking. This is the same room where Camilla had allegedly ordered the ceiling to be covered in gold leaf, causing it to sparkle beneath imported Italian crystal chandeliers. Inside, Queen Camilla is sitting comfortably in a red velvet armchair, embroidered with a large crown, casually drinking Earl Grey tea from an expensive gilded bone china cup. Around her stand 3 newly appointed maids, bowing respectfully as they present her with pastries. When Catherine suddenly enters with the dusty portrait of Diana in her hands, Camilla doesn't appear shocked or embarrassed. Instead, she calmly places her teacup onto its saucer, raises her thin eyebrows, and gives Catherine a smug, dismissive half-smile. Catherine skips all meaningless pleasantries. She walks forward and places Diana's damaged portrait firmly onto the marble table directly in front of Camilla. In a controlled but razor-edged voice, she demands that Camilla explain the humiliating dismissal of Mary and Arthur, as well as the shocking treatment of the family's historic belongings, by throwing them into a damp basement. Catherine makes it clear that she wants to resolve the matter privately, within the family, rather than allow it to explode into a massive public scandal. But instead of responding to Catherine's attempt at restraint, Camilla allegedly reveals an entirely different side of herself. She slowly rises from her chair, adjusts the thick pearl necklace around her neck, and steps toward Catherine. Her eyes are described as burning with cold resentment. Camilla bluntly declares that Windsor Lodge is now her private residence, and that she has been granted direct management authority by the king. She insists that this gives her the right to do whatever she wants with the property, including removing what she considers obsolete memorabilia. She dismissively refers to the old items as unlucky rubbish. Then, looking directly at Diana's portrait, Camilla reportedly remarks that Diana has been dead for decades, and that dusty photographs from the past belong in the basement, where they can make room for her own collection of modern artwork. But there is an obvious problem with that argument. If authority to manage the residence had actually been granted by the king, that authority would not normally mean having unrestricted permission to destroy or discard historic royal artifacts, particularly objects that may form part of the broader royal collection. You cannot simply dispose of a royal portrait because you personally consider it unlucky. Camilla's alleged arrogance now crosses every possible boundary. Ignoring Catherine's warnings, she openly challenges the young princess's position, insisting that Catherine has no authority to lecture a reigning queen about the management of royal property. Then, to demonstrate what she claims is her absolute control, Camilla turns toward the two private guards dressed in black who are standing outside the room. She gives them a signal. The two muscular men enter the room and show absolutely no regard for the Princess of Wales's royal status. They seize Catherine by the arms and forcibly pull her into the cold stone corridor. Catherine struggles against them, but the guards are considerably stronger. They drag her through the passageway and force her outside through the massive iron gates, causing her to lose her footing and nearly collapse onto the gravel. The violent shove leaves Catherine with severely bruised wrists, dark red and purple marks throbbing painfully beneath the skin. Then, the heavy iron gate slams shut directly in front of her. From the second-floor balcony, Camilla watches with what is described as a smug expression. The Queen supposedly believed that by having Catherine physically removed from Windsor Lodge, she had secured an absolute victory. But what Camilla didn't realize was that the bruises left on Catherine's wrists would ultimately become the final blow to her already damaged reputation. Inside his private study at Adelaide Cottage, Prince William stands completely still beside the window. The quiet click of the door opening breaks the heavy silence. Catherine walks inside, carefully pulling back the sleeve of her sweater as she applies ointment to her injured wrist. Beneath the warm glow of the desk lamp, the deep red and purple bruises are impossible to miss. The marks clearly resemble the shape of the private guard's fingers, painfully visible against her pale skin. William turns around and notices the injury on his wife's hand. His expression immediately changes. His deep blue eyes narrow with unmistakable anger as he quickly crosses the room and gently yet firmly takes Catherine's injured hand. His fingers tremble slightly when they make contact with the bruised skin. In a voice that is emotional but controlled, Catherine tells him everything that happened. She explains how the loyal household staff were dismissed, how Diana's portrait was thrown into the basement, and how Camilla had arrogantly ordered private guards to physically remove her as though she were an ordinary trespasser. The anger building inside William isn't a dramatic explosion. It is colder than that. It burns like a silent, terrifying blue flame. Camilla has crossed the ultimate boundary. She hasn't merely disrespected the memory of his late mother and violated the sacred legacy associated with the late queen. She has now gone one step further by allowing physical force to be used against his wife. William looks directly into Catherine's eyes. His voice becomes low and icy, carrying a weight that seems to fill the entire room. He tells her that he will never accept anyone, not even the Queen herself, crossing those boundaries or abusing royal property in a way that dishonors his family. But William is also a man who understands strategy. He knows Camilla is intelligent and politically calculating, and he understands exactly how effectively she can hide behind the authority of her title. If he responds with nothing more than accusations, or allows the matter to become a loud family confrontation, Camilla could easily portray herself as the victim of an aggressive stepson attempting to undermine her in the media. William needs something much stronger. He needs evidence that cannot be dismissed. He needs undeniable proof capable of stripping Camilla of her practical control once and for all. That very night, without waiting for family meetings or becoming trapped in slow administrative procedures, William personally orders the beginning of a highly confidential investigation. He contacts a group of trusted financial auditing specialists who had allegedly been pushed aside by Camilla after she gained greater influence. Alongside them, he brings in an independent private investigation team operating completely outside the current palace security structure. A temporary investigation headquarters is established in a hidden location deep inside a private woodland owned by William. Their objective is simple and strictly confidential. They are instructed to conduct a complete forensic audit of every financial activity, expenditure, payment, and transaction connected to the renovations at Windsor Lodge during the previous 2 years. Under William's direct supervision, the financial specialists begin examining every transaction, regardless of how insignificant it appears. They follow the trail of money allegedly diverted from the Royal Heritage Conservation Fund, a fund supposedly intended specifically for maintaining and preserving historic royal properties. At the same time, the private investigators quietly monitor activity around Windsor Lodge. They approach construction companies, Contractors, luxury furnishing suppliers, and interior design businesses reportedly hired by Camilla, gathering information without revealing the full purpose of their investigation. Inside her newly renovated residence, Queen Camilla remains completely relaxed. She believes her authority is absolute. She believes nobody can touch her position. But she has no idea that beneath her feet, William and Catherine have begun constructing an invisible net that becomes tighter with every passing day. As the investigation continues, the evidence gathered by William's team begins to reveal an increasingly disturbing picture of alleged financial abuse and unchecked ambition. Financial records and anonymous, invoices delivered to the secret investigation. Headquarters reveal information that goes far beyond the original suspicions held by the Prince and Princess of Wales. Catherine sits directly in front of the computer monitors alongside the financial experts, carefully studying the files and transaction records. What they discover is far more serious than they expected. According to the documents, Camilla has allegedly committed a specific and deeply unethical financial offense. A massive amount of royal money appears to have been taken from the family's shared heritage conservation funds. Millions of pounds that were supposedly intended to repair aging roof tiles, reinforce weakening foundations, and protect the historic structure of Windsor Lodge had allegedly been redirected elsewhere. Instead, the funds were supposedly routed through the accounts of favored contractors to finance extravagant and highly personalized improvements to Camilla's residence. The records allegedly show payments for solid marble bathtubs imported directly from Italy. They reveal the construction of an enormous walk-in wardrobe featuring an elaborate gold-accented underfloor heating system. They also document the complete replacement of the property's lighting system with extremely expensive crystal chandeliers. According to the investigation, these alterations were not merely extravagant. They allegedly damaged the historic character of the property and violated the strict conditions attached to Windsor Lodge's use. But Camilla's alleged financial ambitions go even further. William discovers evidence suggesting that she had transformed Windsor Lodge into something resembling a private luxury retreat for members of her own non-royal family. Surveillance footage collected by the private investigators allegedly shows Camilla's children and grandchildren repeatedly visiting the residence for extended stays. They are seen entering restricted sections of the property and enjoying expensive royal household services without the required authorization. At the same time, William and Catherine, who are portrayed as the legitimate future heirs of the dynasty, had allegedly been prevented from entering by the private security personnel stationed at the property. But then the audit uncovers one piece of evidence that changes everything. A secret financial ledger appears to document transactions between Camilla and a major construction contractor. The ledger allegedly records kickback payments transferred into the personal account of Camilla's brother after the contractor received inflated, multi-million-pound renovation contracts connected to Windsor Lodge. If authentic, this would represent the kind of evidence that could transform the entire situation from a family dispute into a major financial scandal. William and Catherine gather everything: the original invoices, the financial records, the wire transfer documentation, the contractor statements, the surveillance footage. Every piece of evidence is carefully assembled into a thick black leather-bound dossier. Each section is marked with bright red labels, prepared to become the weapon capable of ending Camilla's alleged abuse of authority. William places one firm hand on top of the black leather dossier. His eyes burn with determined resolve. He looks toward Catherine. Then he gives a small, deliberate nod. The evidence is ready. Meanwhile, inside the grand banquet hall of Windsor Lodge, brilliant light pours down from enormous crystal chandeliers, reflecting across the glittering gold leaf walls that Queen Camilla has supposedly just completed. The room is alive with conversation. Silverware clicks against fine bone china plates. The rich aromas of elaborate dishes prepared by elite chefs fill the air. Camilla sits proudly at the head of the long antique oak dining table. She is dressed in a magnificent red velvet gown, with a thick, polished pearl necklace resting around her neck. Around her are aristocratic guests and close allies, whom she has invited to celebrate what she considers the magnificent transformation of the estate. Camilla believes she is now the unquestioned master of Windsor Lodge. The loyal servants who once worked for the late queen have been removed. The old treasures have been pushed into the darkness of the cellar. And the residence has become, in her mind, a monument to her own authority. Camilla raises her glass of red wine with a broad smile as one of the guests praises her supposedly exceptional taste in interior design. There is an unmistakable sense of self-satisfaction in her expression. Every line around her eyes seems to reflect the confidence of someone who believes she has finally obtained something she spent years wanting. But her celebration is about to end. The massive wooden doors of the banquet hall suddenly swing open. There is no announcement from the servants. No warning. Prince William and Princess Catherine walk into the room. Their unexpected arrival feels like an icy wind sweeping through the warm banquet hall. The lively conversations instantly disappear. The aristocratic guests stare at one another in confusion as an enormous invisible pressure seems to settle over the room. William walks at the front. His face is cold and expressionless, his deep blue eyes fixed directly on Camilla. Catherine walks beside her husband, her long gown moving softly across the floor. Her calm, regal presence seems to completely overshadow the gaudy display surrounding the reigning queen. Behind them are not ordinary palace employees. They are loyal royal guards personally selected by William. And just before entering the banquet hall, this security unit had quietly disarmed, restrained, and escorted Camilla's private black-uniformed security personnel away from Windsor Lodge. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just a swift removal. Now the crown's loyal guards stand at every exit. Camilla's lavish banquet has suddenly become a sealed room with no obvious way out. Camilla gasps. The smile disappears from her face. The wineglass in her hand begins to tremble, spilling several dark red drops across the spotless white tablecloth. Yet, true to her calculating nature, Camilla quickly regains her composure. She slams the wineglass onto the table and rises from her chair. Her arrogant voice cuts through the silence as she demands to know why William and Catherine have dared to enter her private celebration without permission. William doesn't answer. He walks slowly and deliberately toward the head of the table until he is standing directly opposite Camilla. Only the long wooden table separates them, but at that moment, it feels like the table represents the dividing line between two sides of an irreversible battle. William takes the thick black leather dossier from Catherine. Then he throws it directly onto the table in front of Camilla. The file falls open. Page after page is exposed. Financial records, allegedly misappropriated royal funds, suspicious invoices, residency violations, and detailed evidence connecting the renovations to questionable transactions. William looks directly into Camilla's eyes. His voice is deep, controlled, and powerful enough to echo through the suddenly silent banquet hall. Then he delivers his ultimatum. Camilla must sign a document surrendering every management right she has over Windsor Lodge, and she must leave the property immediately. If she refuses, William warns her, the entire dossier will be released to the royal family and the public that very night. Every financial record, every suspicious transaction, every alleged arrangement with contractors, and every piece of evidence suggesting that the family's shared wealth had been misused. Camilla's confidence collapses in an instant. She looks down at the highlighted figures spread across the pages. Then her eyes move toward the signatures of contractors, allegedly acknowledging the financial arrangements. For the first time that evening, the woman who believed herself untouchable appears to realize that her carefully constructed world may be collapsing around her. The heavily made-up face of the queen suddenly loses all color. Her lips begin to tremble as she stands completely speechless, confronted by the devastating evidence displayed before the very people who had once been her closest supporters. The atmosphere inside the banquet hall becomes unbearably tense. The silence is so heavy that Camilla's shallow, hurried breathing can be heard across the room. The aristocratic guests, who only minutes earlier had been raising their glasses in celebration of the reigning queen, now lower their heads, desperately avoiding eye contact with William and Catherine. They understand what has happened. Camilla has completely lost her position of power, and remaining publicly beside her now would be equivalent to committing social suicide. Yet Camilla has never been someone who gives up easily. Cornered and desperate, her deceptive nature suddenly erupts with renewed force. She points a trembling finger directly at William. Her voice cracks between fury and fear as she accuses him of deliberately plotting against her. She insists that the documents are nothing more than fabricated lies created specifically to destroy the queen's reputation. Then she turns toward the surrounding guests, desperately searching the room for someone willing to defend her. But she receives nothing. Not a single person moves. Not one person speaks. The silence is deafening. Suddenly, Camilla manages to recover a portion of her false confidence. With a sharp, contemptuous expression, she gestures toward a trusted attendant standing quietly in the corner. The servant immediately rushes forward and hands her a tablet. Camilla lifts the screen high enough for everyone to see. Playing across it is a cleverly manipulated surveillance recording. The footage appears to show a woman who looks remarkably similar to Catherine, secretly unlocking the underground archives beneath Windsor Lodge and carrying away valuable royal relics. Camilla's confidence returns. She announces triumphantly that Catherine herself is the thief. According to Camilla's accusation, Catherine had secretly entered the vault and stolen jewelry and priceless family keepsakes before creating the entire scandal as a way to frame her. A wave of whispers spreads through the banquet hall. Several of Camilla's remaining loyal supporters begin murmuring among themselves. Camilla turns toward Catherine with a challenging expression. She genuinely believes she has completely reversed the situation with this unexpected revelation. But Catherine isn't frightened. She isn't confused. And she certainly isn't panicking. Instead, she simply gives a small, almost gentle smile. Her calm expression carries an unmistakable sense of contempt toward Camilla's increasingly desperate attempt to escape the evidence. Catherine refuses to participate in a pointless war of accusations. Instead, she reaches into her pocket, takes out her personal phone, and taps a single button connected to the banquet hall's media system. Immediately, the enormous display screen normally used to showcase paintings and other works of art comes alive. A high-definition video begins playing. The sound is perfectly clear. There are no obvious cuts, no suspicious edits, no manipulation. This is the original recording. It is allegedly footage recovered by William's investigative team from Camilla's own internal security system before the evidence could be destroyed. Everyone inside the banquet hall holds their breath. Every pair of eyes becomes fixed on the enormous screen. Then Camilla's face appears. Her distinctive features are unmistakable. So is her raspy voice. The footage shows her standing inside her private quarters, angrily giving instructions to the captain of her private security team. Her words are clear. She orders the guard captain to alter the surveillance footage of Catherine's visit that afternoon. She instructs him to make Catherine appear as though she were stealing the family keepsakes. Then she orders him to release the fabricated footage online if Catherine dares to speak publicly about the money being spent on Windsor Lodge. And she gives one final instruction. The original contractor invoices must be destroyed. The room remains completely silent. But the footage doesn't stop there. The video cuts to another scene. Camilla is shown meeting privately with the construction contractor. The two allegedly discuss inflating the costs of repairs to the roof and heating system by 3 times the actual amount. The extra money is then supposedly diverted from the family's shared funds into an account belonging to Camilla's brother. The reason? To help cover his gambling debts. Camilla's own voice echoes through the banquet hall. Every word destroys another layer of her defense. Any remaining illusion of the generous, responsible queen collapses before the eyes of her closest supporters. What remains is a portrait of someone who, according to the footage, was willing to manipulate evidence, exploit royal finances, dishonor the memory of the deceased, and redirect family wealth for personal benefit. Camilla stands completely frozen. Her eyes widen in horror as she watches the screen. Her mouth opens slightly, but no words come out. The humiliation unfolding in front of her closest allies is devastating. It strikes directly at the deepest part of her pride. One by one, the guests begin standing from their seats. No one offers Camilla a farewell. No one attempts to defend her. Instead, they quietly bow toward William and Catherine before quickly leaving the banquet hall. They disappear through the doors as though escaping from a dangerous battlefield. Within only a few minutes, the luxurious banquet room is almost completely empty. Only 3 people remain: William, Catherine, and Camilla. The woman who had entered the evening believing herself untouchable now stands trembling in the middle of the wreckage created by her own alleged deception. She is isolated. She is powerless. And the authority she believed was permanent has disappeared in a matter of minutes. William looks down at his wristwatch. Then he slowly raises his eyes toward Camilla. His expression is completely cold. He tells her that she has exactly 2 hours to gather her personal belongings and leave Windsor Lodge. From that moment forward, he declares, management of the entire estate will return to the Prince and Princess of Wales under the supreme authority of the family. Every privilege Camilla previously exercised at the property is revoked immediately. Camilla sees the absolute lack of mercy in William's expression. There is no negotiation left, no argument capable of changing his mind. She finally understands. She has lost. With every possible escape route disappearing and every former ally abandoning her, Camilla is forced to accept the humiliation. She attempts to plead with William. She speaks about family. She appeals to the dignity of the crown. She tries to remind him of their connection. But William doesn't respond. He simply turns his back. He refuses even to look at the woman who, in his eyes, has caused so much suffering to his family. Under the strict and emotionless supervision of the royal guards appointed by William, Camilla is forced to gather her own jewelry and clothing. There are no elegant designer suitcases waiting to be carefully packed by palace maids. There is no luxurious preparation. Instead, her belongings are hurriedly pushed into plain cardboard boxes. They are the exact kind of boxes she had allegedly used earlier to dispose of Diana's precious keepsakes in the dark basement. The symbolism is impossible to miss. The woman who had supposedly treated Diana's belongings as worthless is now forced to pack her own possessions into the same kind of boxes. It is a brutal and almost perfectly poetic form of retribution. The transfer of Windsor Lodge takes place in absolute silence. Camilla slowly drags her suitcase through the main hall. The long red velvet train of her expensive gown brushes against the dusty floor behind her. As she walks through the gates and into the freezing Windsor night, she is confronted by the cold, silent stares of former royal servants. Mary is there. Arthur is there. The very people who had allegedly been expelled earlier have now been reinstated by William and Catherine. They simply watch. There is no celebration. No shouting. No insults. Just silence. There is not even a luxurious limousine waiting to carry Camilla away. Instead, she is forced to enter an ordinary black security SUV. The vehicle pulls away from the estate in complete disgrace. Queen Camilla's control over Windsor Lodge is officially over. The chapter is finished. As the vehicle carrying her disappears around the bend, the massive iron gates of Windsor Lodge close once again. But this time, they close for a different reason. They are no longer being used to keep people out. They are being restored as a symbol of the property's peace and security. William and Catherine turn around and walk back inside. They don't waste another moment. They immediately make their way down toward the dark cellar, accompanied by their loyal guards. Their purpose is clear. They are going to retrieve the treasured belongings of the late Queen. Elizabeth and Princess Diana, Catherine, personally takes a soft silk cloth and begins carefully wiping every trace of dust from Diana's portrait. She does the same with the late Queen's silver frame. Every movement is deliberate. Every object is treated with the respect it had allegedly been denied. With profound reverence, Catherine carries Princess Diana's radiant portrait back upstairs. She carefully places it in its rightful and prominent position at the center of the main living room wall. The diaries and other treasured family relics are cleaned, organized, and carefully restored to their proper places. Slowly, the ancient residence begins to feel warm again. The soul of Windsor Lodge appears to return. William stands silently before his mother's portrait. Under the gentle glow of newly lit candles, Diana's familiar smile seems to bring warmth back into a room that had felt cold for so long. William reaches for Catherine's hand and squeezes it gently. For the first time in what feels like years, the couple senses genuine peace returning to Windsor Lodge. In their eyes, they have achieved a decisive victory. They have restored the family's values. They have protected the legacy of those who came before them. And they have reclaimed a place that had allegedly been transformed by greed and personal ambition. The message is unmistakable. No amount of power should allow greed to destroy the sacred honor, memories, and traditions of the House of Windsor. Honestly, the most cinematic part of the entire story is the idea that everything ultimately came down to a secret ledger and a hidden camera. This wasn't merely a disagreement about furniture or interior decoration. According to the story, it was an elaborate operation involving historical revision, financial manipulation, and an attempt to redirect royal money. And the entire scheme allegedly collapsed the moment someone began following the financial trail. But there is still one question hanging over everything. Was Camilla really acting alone? Or was there a larger network quietly helping her? The mention of a secret letter from 1997 as a possible unresolved loose end suggests that the struggle surrounding Diana's legacy and control over the royal narrative may be far from finished. Camilla could potentially be only one visible piece of a much larger alleged conspiracy inside the royal establishment. And if William and Catherine have truly gained access to this level of investigative power, then this may only be the beginning. Because if the first investigation uncovered this many secrets, there is no telling what could come crashing down next.
The legal order decided patronage, ceremonial appearance, household appointment, and official. Lord Chamberlain's office moved first, mapping every duty and realizing that every authority he accepted would deepen Camilla's humiliation. The speed. Yet at the center of the machinery stood William, staring at the transfer papers